In terms of having an eye for the Eagles, Jack, everyone is going to be watching the Eagles this year to see if they can go back-to-back. A couple changes across the roster. You have a new offensive coordinator. Just so far in camp, a couple days in, how have things looked offensively with some of those new changes?
Yeah, so it seems like it's been a bit of a struggle. Obviously last year's defense was fantastic, right? I mean, they're the number one defense in the league, and I kind of expected them to take a step back because they did lose serious pieces. They lost Darius Slay, they lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They lost Milton Williams, who somehow got $100 million from the Patriots. They lost Josh Sweat. So they did lose key pieces to where I would expect this defense to be in the 5 to 10 range rather than the top 3 like they were last year. And the fact that the offense with kind of the same pieces, and the whole idea was continuity, and Kevin Patullo's here because he knows Jalen and he knows these players and he's next year guy. It seems so far from the reports that we're getting out of training camp that it hasn't been the most crisp. Now, I guess the running game looks fine. I don't know how you judge the running game when guys are in shorts, but passing wise, I think it started off really, really well. Jalen through the first 2 practices was completing passes at 93%. I know that training camp stats are all the rage right now. So, and it was created here. Everyone talks about everything that Philadelphia has done for this country, right? And how much of a leadership type city Philadelphia is. We also are the originators of training camp stats. My good pal Elliot Shore-Parks, the godfather of training camp stats, which has now reached J.J. Watt, who hates training camp stats, and so does every NFL player, but we don't care. We don't care. We're going to keep doing it. So he was 93% the first 2 days of camp, and then the last couple of days been closer in the 70s. So it seems like down in the red zone, they're not exactly as crisp as they have been in years past. So I would say that the offense is currently a work in progress, but again, we are 5 days into camp.
It's funny you said that because I was giving Indianapolis a hard time earlier because there were reports that Anthony Richardson looks good in camp. He's like, yeah, it looks crisp. 6 for 6 yesterday. And I'm like, let's slow down, fire up the Anthony Richardson trade. So it's very funny when people go into training camp stats, but you can take something from that. And since you mentioned the running game, I wanted to ask you about Saquon, which is an obvious question, but is there any chance at all he can replicate what he did last season? Because that was the season for the ages.
Yeah, I don't think that is their plan this year. I actually don't even think that was their plan last year. I think that it just became a necessity because the passing game wasn't where it was supposed to be. So I think last year there was a lot of players on offense that went along with it because they're winning a lot of games. I think they all love Saquon. They want Saquon to break the record. They should have let him break the record in the last game against the Giants. But regardless, we don't need to rehash old arguments. But I think the idea with Saquon this year is keeping him as fresh as possible for the most important games of the year. And it's such an off-season idea, where it's so cute to say, just hold him to 15 touches and everything will be fine. When you're losing a game in the third quarter, you're not going to be thinking that way. You're going to say, get Saquon Barkley the ball. Who cares? Go win the football game. So I think it's a very off-season type of mentality. But I do think heading into the year, they're looking to not use him as much as they did last year to keep him fresh. They did sign A.J. Dillon, who I think stinks. But they brought him in, and maybe he's someone that could take some of the load off of Saquon. I think it's going to come down to Jalen passing the ball more. Now, the last 2 games against your Commanders and the Chiefs, he looked great. That's the Jalen that you hope that you could see. I mean, that's a real top 5 quarterback, is the guy that played the last 2 weeks of the season. I think there's going to be more of opening up the passing game. And A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are 2 extremely prideful players. And I think last year, they were, again, good soldiers. They blocked a lot. They had to almost check their ego at the door. And I don't think for their sake and their future legacies that they want to do that again. I think they also want to make sure that they get fed as well, because they're great players, and they also want to make the Hall of Fame. They want to make Pro Bowls. They want to make All Pros. So I think it's going to be less Saquon this year. Doesn't mean it's going to be less effective, but I think it's going to be a lot more calculated as to how much they use him.
Jack, the Eagles are not sneaking up on anyone this year. I mean, that really wasn't the case last year either, but they're going to have a target on their backs being the defending Super Bowl champs. They also have the biggest jump in terms of difficulty and schedule from last season to this season. So if we're looking at a win total for the Eagles this year, 11.5, it's high. But I mean, look at last year. It was also high. Do you see them getting over this number again? Do you see them kind of having a similar type of success in terms of wins and losses this year?
It's a really good number. I do. I think it's a really good number, 11.5. I've seen like 10.5 some places. That feels super low. 11.5 feels really right because I can see a path to 11 wins. The schedule is really, really tough. There's not really a breather in there. I mean, you could say the Raiders are like a breather, but I assume that with Pete Carroll there, it's going to be more of an adult approach. And I mean, Geno Smith's all right, but whatever. You think that the Giants are maybe their breather games, but at the same time, Russell is definitely mostly done, but it's still an upgrade from what they had last year. And they added Abdul Carter to go along with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau. So that's a pretty scary front. And the Commanders, they are collecting the oldest football team I think I've ever seen. It's truly ridiculous what they're doing down in Washington. I don't know if he can strike gold 2 years in a row. We'll see. But there's just not really this part of the schedule where, okay, let's rattle off 4 straight wins. I don't think they have back-to-back home games. So there's just not really a pocket for them to kind of maybe get their footing. Now, maybe they're just an all-time team, and maybe I'm downplaying how great this team could be. But I think with some of the losses on defense, a tougher schedule, we never know injuries. I think 11.5 is actually a pretty good number. I think 11 wins is right about where I feel about this team's going to be.